we're removing the power steering pump off a 2008 Mercedes GL 450. The background noise in this shop was fairly extensive, so in an effort to make a little better quality video, I'll just walk you through what I'm doing here. First step I'm doing is removing the bolts from this radiator core support. There's 8 bolts to hold it in, 6 across the top and 2 in the front. Have to get a little tray to keep them in, otherwise I'll lose them. Here I'm grabbing the wrong tool for the job, but rather than walk the extra 3 foot to my other box and get the right tool, I chose a shortcut that wasn't going to work. After realizing it's not going to work, I decided to go ahead and do things right. What I'm doing here is little plastic push pins, little plastic fasteners that hold in some rubber seals there at the hood. They have a little pin in top that spreads the bottom open to lock them into place. There's 2 of them on each one of these rubber fittings or rubber seals. There's 2 more that holds the grill to the hood latch support. We have to remove all of those in order to get the core support out of this vehicle. After you remove those pins or little Christmas tree type things, just a little wiggle and they'll come on out of there. Other side the same way. This one here had the lower one missing already, but when we go back together we'll replace it. And the same thing, just a little wiggle, a little pry in there, and that will come right on up out of there. Here are those 2 pins that the grill go into the hood latch support. Now these, not only do we have to pull the centers out, but we'll have to pull the whole push pin out so it'll clear the hose. And that's so the hood latch support's got a little movement so I can pull it away from the core support in order to get it out. Getting ready to go after the last 2 bolts here. We have another just standard 10mm headed bolt on the passenger side. Ratchet wrench makes pretty quick work of it. Not a whole lot of room in that area. On the left hand side there by the windshield washer reservoir, there's a 30mm Torx headed bolt holding it in place. We'll get it out next. This screw wasn't in very tight at all. The pump we're replacing is a reman that's almost brand new. So not everything was put back together very tight on this one, I'm afraid. This is just the engine cover. We're going to get it up out of the way so we don't break anything. Remove the seal away from the core support and the rest of the body. Get it moved back out of the way so it's not getting tangled up in it. And don't pull on this too hard because the hood release cable runs underneath it. There's 3 little plastic clips in there that hold the cable to the bottom. They're just simple little hooks that the cable snaps into. Get that placed back out of the way. Here I'm removing one of the air ducts, goes up to the intake manifold. There's one on either side. They just pull loose, just plastic that's got a little bit of an accordion type joint at one end. And they'll pull right out of there. All this is in an attempt to gain access to this cooling fan. We want it moved so that we have more room to that pump. Right there, I just unplugged the fan. It's super easy to get to. One connector, you just pinch the sides of it and it pops right out of there. Here we have another 2 10mm bolts, one on either side. That's all that really holds that fan in, except for down at the bottom there's 2 little slots the tabs on the fan slide into on the radiator that locks the bottom in place. So as soon as you slide it up, pull it up, it releases from those, and with a little bit of care, you get it out. There's transmission cooler lines on one side. You got a heater or the radiator hose on the other side, so you got to do some finessing to get it out of there, but it's not that bad of a job, as you'll see. Getting caught up in that hood cable. I should have moved it to begin with. I know it seems like it's a little tight there, but just as soon as we get that to come up at a little bit of an angle, it'll come loose from those transmission cooler lines and come right on up out of there. Old eyes, I just don't see so good anymore, so I got to have that flashlight in order to see what I'm doing down in there. I apologize for the rest of the video here. It gets a little shaky and not very good. Didn't have any real way to hold on to the camera. That right there was just another little plastic hook that holds the coolant hose up above the power steering reservoir, keeping it from bouncing around going down the road. You can see just a small tug on it and it releases from the engine. Try to avoid making too large of a mess. I got suction gun out so I can pull the power steering fluid out of the reservoir. It's not a whole lot left in here. This has been a handy little tool. Bought it to bleed brakes with, and in my opinion it doesn't work real good for that, even though that's what it was marketed as. But boy, it works real good for vacuum fluids like this, and I use it all the time for bleeding out power steering pumps on GM vehicles. Some of them can be quite a pain, and this thing makes the job a whole lot easier. So get this tool put up out of the way and change the angle of the camera here so kind of see down in there and see what's going on next. Just double checking that I got most of the fluid out so I'm not making too big of a mess. Alright, my next step, I don't have my camera set up for it yet, but you'll see in a moment, I'm going to be down here removing a hose clamp. That's just the power steering fluid return hose, goes into the bottom of the reservoir. Like I said, this thing's been apart here super recently, so it come off with no trouble. Loosen the clamp and the hose just pulls right off. Now, if yours hasn't been off for quite some time, it'd be stuck on there a little bit. Just be careful with it. Get a pick in there, kind of pry the hose away from that nipple, and she'll come on off there. The fluid reservoir itself is held on with 3 of these T30 Torx fasteners. This is the only one I could get a decent view of with my camera, even though I've removed the heater or the cooling fan. It's still pretty tight in there. But the next 2 bolts are right through the middle of the housing. They're kind of recessed in there. Not real hard to get to, though. All these bolts are captured, so you don't have to worry about them falling out and getting lost. None of them will pull all the way loose. And I'm actually using a Cobalt Torx bit there from Lowe's. It happens to be almost half again as long as my snap-on, which is what I really needed to reach in there and get hold of these fasteners. So, inexpensive tools sometimes save your butt. Here, just giving it a shake, make sure that everything feels loose. Where the reservoir meets the power steering pump itself, there's a little fastener, a little clip of sorts that snaps this reservoir onto the power steering pump. I try to get you a shot of it here. It's in such a bad spot that even getting my phone down in here, it was kind of tight, hard to see. You can see that nipple drip in there. Right past it, there's that little silver clamp back there, that little E-clip or whatever you want to call it. Kind of a butt to get to. Here it is all pulled out. I wasn't able to record me getting it out. It's a pair of needle nose vice grips though. You can work it in there and get it snapped out of place. My next step was to wiggle and shake and get this reservoir off. Lost a little bit of fluid, but didn't make too bad of a mess. So, alright, getting close to the end here. This is our pressure line. It's a 22mm banjo bolt. New pump comes with new seals for it. You still want to be careful where these end up. Make sure you don't accidentally leave one on the banjo bolt or on the fitting on the hose itself. When I take this loose here, if you look closely, you can tell that one of the seals, one of the copper washers, is still stuck to the pump. Here it is right here. Make sure you have both of them in hand, that way you don't have a leak further down the road. Now, I couldn't get a camera back here at all. I'm reaching back on the back side of that pump to remove one of 3 bolts that holds the pump to the engine. This is a E12 Torx bolt, or an external Torx bolt. The 2 on the front are identical to it. This one here is a little bit difficult to get to. You need to be able to get back there with a ratchet wrench or something. That's what I used here to take it loose. Here's the bolt once it's removed. Not much to it, just a little Torx headed bolt that a lot of European manufacturers are famous for. Again, I had no real way of hanging onto a camera and recording this part, but those 2 bolts right there by that pulley are the only 2 things left holding this pump on. We'll go ahead and pull those off and get the pump out of the way. And here it is on the table. Remove those 2 bolts. And the opposite end of that elbow that's leaking all over the place is where the other bolt in the back went. That's another hole, but when you're lining everything up, don't get anything started in it. It's not needed for anything.